Kirk Larsen has been plying his trade in Southland for the best part of the last 4 decades. Many of his greatest wins have come right here at Ascot Park in Invercargill. He's driven over 500 winners, developed so many young horses, many of whom he's sold overseas. And today we get a chance to sit down with him, reflect on some of those horses and talk about his greatest horse, Howard Bromack. Well, I'm in the deep south. I know that today anyway. It's nice and lovely outside.
Only -2, Greg. What are you worried about?
Tropical, I suppose you're going to tell me.
Yeah, she was a bit fresh, but at least the ground wasn't frozen this morning.
No. Tell me about Kirk Larsen and growing up. What size family did you have? And what was school like for you?
Yeah, school was sort of. I'd actually got school cert, and I stayed for sixth form certificate. And Dad actually said, "Off you pass it, he would pay, and if you don't pass, I'll pay." I said, didn't like the odds, so I didn't sit it. So I left those years, and they weren't that keen on for me to go in the stables, to be fair, and it took a while to sort of get their head around going to work in a stable because the money wasn't that good and long hours, but they finally won them over.
Any family background in racing? Your dad owned a few, didn't he?
Yeah, the mother's side we always had horses, you know, because back in the day, you know, the milk carts and things like that, and the Mortons, they were a family background, you know, from racing, and my father's brother actually bred Trusty Scott.
Right.
And grandfather's father's brother, so, and my father's father always liked to bet. He's a TAB man, $1 each way. And my uncle and father were in business together for 30, 40 years.
Was that selling cars?
Yeah, selling cars, and they always raced a few, you know, and that's sort of what brought me to the racing side eventually, but I always had ponies and things like that right from day one. You
were big on the ponies, weren't you? You used to go around a bit at the shows and stuff, and were pretty successful.
Yeah, no, I'd done that, like every weekend basically. I was away somewhere at shows and hunting, one-day events and things like that, yeah.
Who was your first employer?
Dad had horses with Hunter McHugh originally, and I started just giving him a hand on the weekends and school holidays. And then they had a few with Bryce Buchanan, and I ended up there for a bit. And basically, when I left school, that's where I went and started there. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, but before you left school, this racing bug had already kicked in because you were already amateur riding.
Yeah. Well, when I was going from ponies to hacks.
Yeah.
And a fellow down the road, Bob McDowell, had this mare, and he said, "How about you take it and, you know, do the work with it, and we'll train it to race as a steeplechaser." And I thought, well, I need a hack in here, and it was quite a nice looking horse, chestnut with white legs and white face, and I thought, the worst comes to worst, can be a good show jumper. So he said, "I'll do that." So which is what we did, and then I got my amateur jockey's licence, and he went from there.
Yeah, and you had a bit of success too. What you end up with, 3 winners?
Yeah, I think I only had about a dozen to finish rides, won about 3, and I was actually at that stage, the last bit of I was working for Bryce, and it was when I got my professional trials licence for driving the trials for standardbreds, and they wouldn't let you have a professional in one and an amateur in the other, and I could have actually transferred to a professional licence at that stage, which I thought about, but I thought, I hadn't broken a bone at that stage. I thought I'll just leave it at that. And I was always too heavy to be a jockey to carry on, but I really enjoyed that side of it.
You won a couple with Shirley?
Shirlina, yeah.
Shirlina, sorry.
Yeah, that was the original mare I got off Bob, and she'd had something like 20 placings before we got her, and for Ted Winslow trained her, and we ended up winning a couple of steeplechasers with her, and she was a half sister to a good horse called Glendoo. It was a good horse in his day.
Yep. And Wapiti was the other winner for the late Neil Ridley.
Yeah, Wapiti, I rode him 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
I nearly won 2. I just got beat at Riccarton on him one day. And he was owned by the late Bill Cherry, who was the commentator down here. So, and he was a good horse. And yeah.
Yeah, you nearly won that one at Riccarton. You nearly won it. There was a pencil line, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a 4,000 metre steeplechase, and it was...
Was that at Grand National time?
I think it was Christchurch Hunt, was always the week before Grand National.
Yep.
And he only got beaten in the nose or something, so yeah, it was a bit of a shame. I was keen to get that one.
Yeah, but you always enjoyed it, and you were telling me before you had a fall there at Riccarton over Cutzes, which back then they were real fences.
Yeah. Well, I only ever had the one fall in the steeplechasers, thankfully, and then I said, well, at least it was the biggest jump in New Zealand.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave the thoroughbred side of things riding-wise to that, because your driving career kicked off in '85, and Smooth Henry was your first winner.
Yeah, won at Fulbury one night for Sammy Ballot, which I still drive the old one for Sammy. So yeah, and it was a horse that Gordon Davidson had bred. So yeah.
Yeah. Were you working for Bryce at that stage?
Yeah. And Graham Anderson ended up buying the horse off Sam eventually, and I won another race for him when Bryce trained him. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Those junior driver days, tell me a little bit about those, because you were pretty successful. I think you had 13 in year 2 and maybe 14 or 15 in year number 3. So you were going well.
Yeah, no, I was pretty lucky really, because it was pretty hard going those days because they weren't penalty free, and like you only got one boys race a month if you're lucky, and they're always pretty average horses because they weren't penalty free.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing with juniors. As soon as they made them penalty free, like, you know, all my boys won on all my better horses because they were penalty free. You had to do it. So it was hard going, you know, but I was pretty lucky. I was pretty well supported, you know, through my days. You know,
Yeah.
always had plenty of drives. So.
And good days too. A lot of camaraderie amongst the juniors in those days as well.
Yeah, like still really good friends. I remember like Anthony Butt coming down, fellas like that, and Davey Butt and all those boys, Tim Butt. And, you know, they always come down and stay the night. We'd always have a couple of quiets just to poke each other along a bit.
Yeah, which is always
and
good
still
fun.
good friends with those fellas are, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Was the training caper always going to be the next step for you?
Yeah, I think so. You know, like driving alone wasn't probably enough in it, and I was always keen to do the training at some stage, so I sort of tried to keep my junior's licence as long as I could, and in those days we weren't paid a lot. I think the only wage I've ever worked for was $70 a week.
Right.
So, you know, you couldn't afford to stay too long, so you had to have a bit of a go.
Gentle Admiral, got things underway training-wise?
Yeah, before I started training, I used to father had a block of land, and brother and that we'd all get in at night, so we got home from work and we'd breaking some in and jogging. I used to lease a few, and part of the deal when I worked for Bryce was allowed a horse out there, so
Yep.
I always made sure I had one out there, and when it didn't shape up or sold or whatever, we got another one out. And I was lucky enough when I worked for Bryce, I at least went off Gordon Davidson, and qualified and sold it to Jeff Gibson Smith in those days, and that sort of got me going, you know,
Yep.
financially. And but we did, you know, we'd have sort of 8 or 10 horses at home at nights. We were doing breaking in, jogging up, and that was another reason we went out my home, because I was sort of starting to get a few more. And Gentle Admiral was a horse that Ken McRae had brought at the sales for an owner, and he suggested, you know, I broke it in for him, so he said to the owner to give it to me to train. So
Yep.
that's how it sort of started with him, you know.
You mentioned the sale of horses, and that's been a huge part of the Kirk Larsen dynasty, I suppose. It's basically what's kept you going.
Yeah, well, in those days, you know, like anyone had no money, you get a score, and you want to buy a block of land, and so, you know, that's the only way you could do it really, is get them going and sell them, and so, yeah, that's sort of what we done really, just traded, and Bryce, who I worked for, you know, he sort of probably taught me a lot of, say, the business side of things, and he did very well out of it over the years, and that's what he did, get them going and selling them, and it's all very well keeping them, but that's what I always said, they never go broke when you sell them.
No. You gleaned a lot, obviously, out of working for him. Who were some of the other big influences, both training-wise and driving-wise?
Yeah, in those days, after work, before I finished, or just as I finished with Bryce, I went and worked for Greg Harper,
Yep.
and just for a winter stint, and very good trainer.
Be a little bit warmer over there too.
Yeah, well, those days we didn't race much in the winter, and
Yep.
and I sort of a good chance. Graham Anderson jacked it up for me, and so we went over. He'd sold Arden Meadow and JB's fella. They
Yep.
were 3-year-olds over there at the time, and so I jacked it up. So I went and worked there, and I really liked it over there. I could have quite easily stayed there if I'd bought the block of land here with my brother before I left. Otherwise, I might have stayed a bit longer. But I had horses to come home to and things like that. So, yeah.
So that's sort of the late 80s. That's
Yeah.
around that period.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I noted.
I think it was 85 I bought this place, basically. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was just going to talk to you about Blue Innocence. won its maiden and did it in good style, and in fact won 5 in a row.
Yeah, no, he was a real fast horse. Yeah, no, he was one of those horses. I probably drove half a dozen horses during my career that we never ever saw the best of them, and he was definitely one of them. Like he won 5 in his row, and then his last start, he won the big 4-wheel race at Forbury.
And it was a big race back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 20 and 30,000 in those days, you know,
Yep.
and yeah, because I always remember the clerk of the course that day was Charisma,
Oh yeah,
the
Olympic,
Todd's
yes.
Olympic horse. And I've got a video of it somewhere.
Yeah.
Where he brought us back to the scale, you know.
Well, that race was full of royalty then, because you beat Willem Wink, who was driven by the late D.G. Jones, and you mentioned Anthony Butt before was third on a horse called Toss. So your relationship with D.G., I think you had Rum and Cloves a little bit later on that he'd obviously trained originally. So you were hanging out with the big names in the game.
Yeah, well, it's probably through I met Anthony Butt, as I say, through the Junior Drivers series and become friends with him, and when we took Kiwi Supreme to Addington, it's probably the first horse I took up there.
Yep.
He said, "I'll come and stay at Derek's," you know, and no, Derek, you know, as we all know, was a great fella, and yeah, he sent us a lot of horses over the years, and same with Tim and Nance, that just weren't quite good enough, you know, whatever, up Christchurch, and you know, Rum and Cloves was one of them, yeah.
So when it came to breeding, a little bit later on we'll talk about that, but more selecting horses, and particularly the Holmes Hanovers, did you have a theory on that, what you were looking for?
Yeah, well, basically, you know, I felt what you could buy them in those days was better than breeding, and breeding was time.
Yep.
So that's sort of what encourages the sales for a start. And you know, Bob McArdle, always had a lot to do with Bob through the years, and he always said to me, he said, the first question someone will ask you, a buyer will ask you, what's it buy?
Yep.
And he said, if it's something decent, he said, no, they sell themselves, whereas something average, you know, they said, oh, we might just watch it again, you know. And so I always tried to buy in the top echelon if we could. In those days, Holmes, you know, was, you know, we had a lot of luck with him, and he was only standing at 5,000, so people didn't have to get the money they do nowadays to get out of them, and consequently we were buying horses for reasonably good value, you know.
Yeah.
So everyone was winning, you know.
Yeah. Tell me about your relationship with the late Bob McArdle.
He offered me on a Bromac on a 50-50 deal, and which I took, and we won a couple of races with her, but couldn't sell her. No one, there was a few trialled her and that, and to turn her down. And so it sort of come in, and I said to Bob, I said, well, you might as well take her and just give me a colt for my share. And he said, oh no, we'll breed off her. And he said, I'll put her in foal and we'll go halves. So that's how that worked.
Yeah. Winning the Southland Oaks on Lover's Wish for Bryce Buchanan must have been pretty special in '95.
Yeah, no, it was good. I drove her a few times. I think she went really good in the Neville Hour final and the New Zealand Oaks. She ran 5th or 6th both times. And we got a really good run in the Southland Oaks, and I think Murray Brown's horse was going to win it. A horse called Boney and Dieter, I think it was, and it ran off the track, and I got a beautiful run up the fence and ended up winning it. So, but she was a lovely little filly. She was really well-bred filly. And
Training-wise, the following year you got to double figures for the first time. Handy Queen won a couple, Rum and Cloves won a couple, but you had a horse called Breeny's Fella, which again only enhanced your reputation as a developer of young horses.
yeah, well, he was a horse I bought the sales myself. I think we paid about 10,500 for him. And I actually had him and another horse, or fellow was coming over from Aussie to buy them, and basically I was waiting for the phone call what time to pick him up from the airport, and he never arrived. So, and the other horse he was going to buy ended up a quite a good horse too, a horse called Ramadrum, went over a couple 100,000. So I'm picking E-Rude today, he didn't turn up. But anyhow, an old fellow worked for me at the time, he used to do my boxes and that, and he said, I must have come off the track one day and said to him, I said, this horse is a real good horse. I said, you know, and he never ever forgot it. And then when I was trying to sell it, he said to me one day, he said, that horse, he said, you know, how much do you want for him? And so I told him, and he said, well, I got a bit of money. He said, I'll buy the bloody thing. And I said, well, it's up to you. And he said, well, I want to start in the kindergarten though. So I said, righto. So I sold it to him.
Yep.
And
he was by Holmes Hanover?
Yeah,
Holmes
Hanover.
Holmes?
Yeah, another Holmes had a real good, like, quite a good mare, farm made. She won 5 or 6, and a speedy little mare, and that was always the secret with Holmes. I thought, you know, Holmes crossed with a speedy type mare, you know, Holmes would put a bit of stamina into them. And I'd had a bit to do with the father raced quite a few out of that family. And it goes back to old Colin Baines' family, which were actually trotters, you know. the fellow always once said, you know, cross a trotting breed with a pace and sometimes get a good horse.
Yep.
So, as well, so I bought him, and so I sold him to this old fellow that worked for me, and then we had him. He won. He raced in the kindergarten his first start, and I probably drove him a little bit conservative, and he went quite good without much luck. So I said, we'll give him one more start at Winton, and then we'll turn him out. And we started him that he won by about 10 lengths, and you know, so I turned him out and brought him back, and you know, he came up really nice, but we raced him in the Sire Stakes in town. I think he sat parked and run fourth, but I think Out It Again won it, and Franco in fourth, and like
It was a deep race.
It was a very, very, and I think they went 55 in those days, which was really good. And then Ted Demler was negotiating to buy Out It Again, and it didn't pass the vet for whatever reason, and so they sort of come looking for the next best one, which was probably my one. So at that stage, we were heading to Auckland for the Sales Series and the Great Northern Derby. So we ended up doing a deal where we raced him through those races, and providing he passed the vet after they took him home, and that's what happened.
Nice to race a good horse.
Oh yeah, but it was always about the risk, you know, and that's what we done with Howard Bromick.
Yep.
You know, he looked pretty good.
Yep.
We sold him after he qualified, and we put pretty decent money on him.
Yep.
Which even at the time I thought was probably a wee bit rich, but we did think a bit of him, and I thought to myself then, I thought, well, you know, this is probably one we probably should keep, but you know, the same thing, it's too big a risk. So basically what we done, we sold 3/4 of him and kept a quarter, and so it worked out really well.
By Falcon. So the link with Bob and the Bromack name.
Yeah. No, as I say, the first one was Harvey Bromack, and he ended up winning in 12, 15 races, and was quite a nice horse. And and this fella here.
He won on debut, and I think he was $1.40, so clearly the raps were out there. And you took him to Addington Raceway. That wasn't probably the experience that you were looking for.
No, it's one of those races you wish you'd had it over again, but tried to push Davey Budd out.
At Christchurch, at Addington Raceway, that was probably a gutsy play.
Well, it ended up backfiring on me badly.
Yeah,
so I learned the hard way, you might say.
Yeah, that was about the 1,000 metres, 900 metres from home, and he actually ended up with his foot in the front sulky in front of him, didn't he? And he went down on his nose, literally.
No, it was a pretty nasty crash, and I thought he broke his neck for a minute. But as I say, it was one of those situations, we thought a bit of him, and I was getting a good run, and they started coming through wide, and probably left my run too late, getting Davey out. Got him half out, and he popped me back in, but unfortunately, when I went back in, he ended up putting his leg over the wheel, which ran up into the cart, and he had quite a big hole in his shoulder, which, you know, I come home, I remember the days it was still pretty cold those time of year down here, and I took him to the Reedy Beach every day. Swam him in the water, and got it right again, and went from there.
Well, you were not only vindicated by what you thought of him, obviously that was a scary day, but he basically never let you down after that, did he?
No, you know, and he wasn't an early 3-year-old really, you know, and you find that with the Sire Stakes, it's always been those better 2-year-olds that clean up. So, like he did a good race, and I like to think we sort of looked after him all the way through, because he was never the best horse at those days, but he just, you know, because hopefully we looked after him, he got better. You
got supremacy with him?
Yeah, that was the plan, because Lynette, who was in the horse, lived in Sydney, and he was paid up for the Breeders' Crown, so we said we'd sort of planned it, but it all basically come down to how he went to supremacy. And we'd had the float booked the next morning. He won the supremacy on the Sunday, I think, and then Monday morning we had to make our mind up Sunday night whether we go. And we decided to go, so we were on the truck the next day. And
he raced well. I mean, I think Elsu won that derby. He ran second in the heat and sixth in the final, and then went to the Breeders' Crown, won a heat, placed in the semi, and fourth in the final. So he vindicated the trip, didn't he?
Oh yeah, and we're a bit unlucky in the derby. He got pushed out with 1,200 to go, which was basically illegal. And that buggered our chances, you know. He went a real good race for a second in the heat, and then we freshened him and then sent him down to Melbourne for the Breeders' Crown here.
The New Zealand Cup, the Holy Grail, you got a chance to line him up in that 3 times?
And his first one he ran third, I think it was. He got a good run, and it was a great thrill. And both his other runs were pretty good too, to be fair.
the Inter-Dominion series that was won by El Su. Take me through those heats, because he was in wonderful form then, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, he went really good the first night, run third when we thought he'd need the run. He come out and won the next night, and then the last night he only got beaten a nose in the finish, and then we drew sort of probably bad for him in the final, and he ran a really good race for fourth. He was, a bit lucky he could run second or third, but he wouldn't have won, of course, because Elsie was just too good. But he was a horse that thrived on racing, especially at that stage of life.
Yeah.
And he just got better and better, where some horses, as you know, go through the series, they get worse,
Yep. He got a couple of big Group 1s, though. What was more special, the New Zealand Free-for-All or the Auckland Cup?
I think the Free-for-All always was the one that really, tickled me throat, you might say.
Yep.
Mainly because first Group 1.
Yep.
And because one thing that made it, like when I come back to the birdcage, like I think every Southland, of course.
Yeah.
You
had a few friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which got a kick out of,
Yeah. And the Auckland Cup, I think it's the most positive you've ever driven him. You must have had him bang on for that.
Yeah. Brad Morris worked for me in those days, and I was doing a lot of back and forwards, and we kept him up at Todd Mitchell's. Yeah, there was just something about that day. I took him out, and I thought, he's spot on. I could just tell the birdcage, he looked good. He just felt really fit, and so.
He had to sit park for a bit of the race.
Yeah, probably over, as you say.
Well, not overdrove him, but you drove him confident.
I drove him to win, yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's no doubt about that. And I drove to his strengths because he was sort of tough, and I felt, barring Old Serena, I thought I should have him reasonably covered, but.
She was on your back, and Brent Mangos, probably at the time, it was a piece of tactical genius. He's come outside you and gone to the front, and probably thought he had the race won.
Yeah, no, he was, and she was the one I was most feared in the race.
Yep.
And I had up the straight, I was thinking I'm going to get run over, but no, one thing he tried his heart out, and he's that sort of horse.
Kirk, has he been the one? I mean, he's got the greatest record for you as a trainer and driver because you retained him, but is he the best horse you've ever sat behind?
Oh, you got to say he probably was, but potentially I don't think he was. There's two or three others, like I say, I had probably about, like BB's Lumber was a very good horse.
Yep.
Blue Williams was a very good horse. And then not long after Howard, I got running at Excuses, and I even felt he was better because he had a wee bit more speed. But I think he won 8 out of his first 12, and he was just getting better and better. I think he won his last 3 in a row, and he done a suspensory at his last start. We were heading for the 4-year-old race at Forbury with him, and the last start here he won, and he done a suspensory, and he never ever come back from it.
He came up to the Cup meeting and won on show day.
Yeah, he went really good the first day, run second or third, I think it was, and he won well the next day, and then I took him home and spelled him, and then he come out in Invercargill and all the Southland Cup, won both those days, and they were $20,000 races. So no, he's probably one horse that I wished we'd had a lot longer.
Yeah, another smarty, best deal yet.
Yeah, he was a nice Bettor's Delight. Marty Ferber bred him and owned him, and we always liked him. He was a nice horse.
He ended up winning the Premier's Cup, I think, in Australia and Queensland.
He won 2 derbies in the finish. I think he won the Brisbane Derby and Gold Coast Derby. He was a lovely horse, but Marty had a few, and Marty generally wasn't a seller, but he said, I've had a few now, I'm getting a wee bit behind the ledger, he should probably need to sell one. I said, well, he's probably the one. He was a Bettor's Delight, and he got good money for him, but he was a lovely horse,
Tristan, your son, he's in the game. Was that what you were hoping for? Did you always want him to get involved, and was he keen from a young age?
Yeah, no, he probably wasn't that keen right from day one. He always had a pony and that, and then he done the kids' carts, but he just sort of one day just started, really getting keen. I never pushed him. I thought, something you got to want to do. Yeah. And you for a start, I didn't think he would, to be fair, but he's a bit like me, not that good at school. And it was funny because he was always a kid, you never get him to go to bed at night, and then he started, helping out, and the next thing, all of a sudden, he'd be way to bed at 7 o'clock at night, and I couldn't believe it. It was just like a switch went off on him. Yeah. And now he can't get enough of it. So yeah.
You like him round the horses? Is he kind with them?
Yeah, he's probably kinder than me. But he does. He really loves the horses.
Yep.
You know, he quite often go there and he's given one a pet and that. You know,
Yep.
and yeah, and he's got good hands on him. He's gentle with them, and yeah.
And you provided him with his first win. Talk me through your emotions of watching that race and him going over the line, and it was a pretty comfortable watch, to be fair.
Yeah, well, we had that wee horse, Cheeky Dundee. He was actually a lovely little horse. And he was a great horse for him because he was good gaited and you could sort of drive him anyway, and you know, and so he's a great horse for him to learn on, really. But he had a breathing problem most of his life, and you sort of had to drive him with the right run, you know, to get the best out of him. You know, one thing I'll say for him, he always didn't overdrive him anyhow, which I like, you know, like
Yep.
always great one. There's always another day, you know.
Yep. He beat Nathan Williamson, which I'm going to touch on some of the people that have worked for you because there's a bit of a list there, Kirk, to be fair.
Yeah, they've all been through most of them at some stage.
Yep.
Yeah, yes, because we always, back in the day, we were working, sometimes when we were a really big team, we were working 30 or 40 horses.
Yep.
So I had 4 or 5 of staff, and yeah, I've been lucky over the years. We've had some good kids. And
Gareth Dixon, he kicks things off.
yeah, Gareth was one of the first ones that come here, and he'll still take a bit of pride out of kids that come work for you. And you know, Adam Sanderson, he's a kid that come here and didn't know one end of the horse to another, and now he's one of the top drawers in Brisbane. And we had another young boy here, Alan Broomhall. He come here, he had only one leg, he'd lost a leg and a thing, so we got a great buzz out of giving him his first winner. Yeah.
Yeah. Brad Morris called him for Smoko today, so they still call in and check up on you.
Yeah, Brad, he comes around a bit, and you know, Brad was really good. He come at a good time. Tony Strafford was actually with me at the same time. He come. It was when I was doing a bit of travelling, and I needed someone to sort of look after the home front. So Tony came and worked for us, and Brad was there as well. And Brad used to do a lot of the travelling with the horses, so it was able to, you know, come back and forward a bit because it's not easy when you're down here, but it was always something I was keen to do. Was, you know, I couldn't see the point in having a good horse and sending it to someone else to train. You know, we're in this game to get good horses. You know, want to have a go. So yeah.
You've scaled back a wee bit now. You sort of work around a dozen, but young Shane over there, he's here a couple of days a week and just thrives on it.
Yeah, no, we've got a good big team around here. All Tristan's mates, you know, Tom Nally and Ollie Kite and Max Hill and all the boys. They end up here around for a roast, and we have a lot of banter. And they sometimes come down here in the afternoon. I give them one to drive just to get another couple done. So they're quite handy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been great catching up with you, mate. What about the future? You've still got a lot of acreage here. It's a big property. It's a beautiful property though. Obviously well maintained, but there's always something to do, I suppose.
Yeah. No, it's we've sort of set it up, and like how many trees were planted here. Like every paddock's got shelter in it now, and it's all set up pretty good, really. So with Tristan coming on, we'll just, you know, it's up to him what he does, and I'm sort of trying to take it a wee bit more easier and let him sort of, but he's still a wee way to go yet. He's still got a bit to learn. So we'll just see how things go the next bit. But you know, it's a great setup, and it'd be a shame to let it go. So hopefully, you know, he may be able to carry on one day.
And what about training wise? I mean, you're up over 370 odd now, and you've surpassed the 500 driving wins, which I suppose back in the early days was beyond your wildest dreams in many ways.
Yeah, sort of, you know, just take it as it comes. I don't look at those things too much, but it probably cost me a lot driving wise when I started travelling, because he lost a lot of drives and I never really got a lot of them back.
Yep.
But then I was reasonably heavily involved in the training side of it, so, you know, where you lose one, you win another. And as far as the training, well, you know, yeah, it would be nice. We could have won a lot more if we hadn't sold them, but we wouldn't have the property we got and what we got. So, you know, the old story, you can't have your cake and eat it. So it's all about getting a happy medium, you know, yeah.
You've got a lot of great friends that have come via this game.
Yeah, it's a good game, you know, good people on it. If they're not good, they don't last, yeah. So...
You've lasted quite a while, mate. And you still love it. You've still got the passion for the horse, haven't you?
Yeah, well, it's one thing with racing, like, you know, people talk about, you know, it costs this and it costs that, but you talk to any owner, they get a bigger thrill. And it's always good to see people, you know, you give them a bit of joy. So, you know, we just set that syndicate up, and I get a kick out of, you know, seeing the people get that enjoyment. And that's what keeps them, you know, turning up to, you know, having a share in a horse and things like that. And hopefully it continues, because you meet a lot of good people and it's a great game, you know. So yeah.